We've seen whistleblowers come forward in the United States about these alleged programs. Knowing that there are Australian operatives potentially involved with these, do you think that we would ever maybe see them go on the record and come forward as well?
No.
No?
No.
But at that time, you had kind of held back. So, but the big question is, who is Jay Stratton?
We don't have this hidden book in a safe somewhere. It says, in case of aliens, break glass.
I don't know. They're a little hard-edged, you know, this whole idea of heaven and hell and things along those lines, and you have to prepare yourself and things. Yeah, it's sort of all well and good, but you end up scaring little children, you know, which I don't like, and I don't think it's necessary. But people should be spending time thinking about that. What's their purpose? Why are they here?
You think it's a black card or a red card?
I have a feeling it's a red card.
Your feeling it's a red card.
Yeah.
You feel it here?
Yeah, I feel it right here.
Oh, in your heart?
Yeah, it's weirdly, yeah, right there.
So like a heart?
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for being with us. The sDm Files, episode 17. Trickle on in. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends. Go do all the things. Go do them right now. Come find me, x.com/shoutdownmine. We will do the thing.
They've been asked to sign non-disclosure agreements to not reveal this to their own government in Australia. So these are serving military personnel in Australia who are seconded, for example, to the British SAS in Hereford, 22 SAS, or to the Special Boat Service in the United Kingdom, and there's been European retrievals that Australians have been involved in as a result of their secondment to those operations. And knowing these guys, they're patriots, they love their country, they love Australia, but they also have a deep respect for the American alliance, and they just implicitly assume that this must be being understood at a very high level by the Australian government, because there's no way that the Americans would conspire to keep this secret from the Australian government. And when I've had the conversation with them, look, I've spoken to former prime ministers, I've spoken to former defence ministers, nobody knows about this.
Yeah.
And they're shocked because they've been told to keep quiet about it at their level on the ground as the combat soldier that's involved in these operations. And they are telling me they have been involved in the retrieval of non-human technology, period. End of story.
Ross fuckum Coulthart on the UFOzzie, the UFO program with Ross Coulthart. You know, basically on his way out of town, I guess. Or maybe, I guess, on his way back in time. However, he was doing his thing to get to contact in the desert, I'm sure. He dropped off for some interviews with some of the local up-and-comer ufologists in Australia. I bet you he's probably like even, you know, way much more of a super-duper superstar in Australia than he is just in America amongst ufology people. In Australia, he's got to be like 6,000 times more popular or more. I don't know. So it's a great interview, actually. It's, you know, like I was saying, lately Ross Coulthart has been spending a lot more time just kind of explaining his point of view than he has been, you know, asking rhetorical journalism questions. So you know, the interviews have been cool to hear him do his thing. I mean, he's pretty obviously, he's like a Greer camper without being a Greer camper. And a lot of things this year, you know, with Jake Barber and others, and Jake Barber, like, at first was, oh man, this guy's a Greer camper too. But then it turns out, you know, there's a split there with the Greer camp. And so Ross Coulthart's been bringing on Greer camp people and presenting them kind of like they're his own people, basically, all year. And he's got kind of like the same kind of like outlook as a Greer camper. That basically the aliens are the good guys. And most of the government guys are like the bad guys. Trying to keep all the technology basically from the other Earthlings. And the aliens are mostly good, and the aliens are eventually going to get kind of like he thinks that they're going to get pissed off at the humans that keep fucking with them. And so it's a fun, perspective that you get from Ross Coulthart. And they talk about everything that's kind of local to Australia also. So there's a lot of this time being spent talking about how the Australian government and Australian military and Australian special forces and Australian intelligence infrastructure kind of integrates into the bigger Western military industrial complex. And that basically, he makes the point a few times. That's what he used to kind of report on, was how the Australian intelligence community and special forces would hook into American stuff, and sometimes in ways that wasn't beneficial to Australia. So he didn't think that it should work that way, and he uses those examples as examples of Australia that's supposed to be a sovereign democratic country losing its sovereignty and democracy, even if it's just in those really specific situations or topics like UFOs. But he thinks that it's those are just quite obvious symptoms of much larger problem that is the American government and the American military and the American intelligence infrastructure that basically rules most of the world with kind of an iron fascist fist, especially when it comes to considering extraterrestrial technology and stuff like free energy. Especially, that's where everyone goes, right? Free energy is being withheld from everyone for lots of reasons. And so, like I said, it's a good watch. It's kind of like, it's almost like a tell-all. The guy asks him a lot of questions. He answers, what seems like to be pretty candidly. So, and like I said, he's like, this is published 2 days ago. It says he's like literally on his way. He's about to get on the plane or the boat or however Australians get to places to go to contact in the desert, right? Maybe he's not going. That's why he's still got his blitzkrieg of content going while everyone else is there. I don't think so though. He's got to be there, right? Gotta be there. He's got to be there at least to cover stuff. He's the leading ufology journalist, so he's got to be there at least to be covering it. So,
who was involved in key positions in these UFO programs? OSAP, ATIP, the UAP Task Force, and ARROW. He is the only person who is involved in all of those, who is sort of the common link from the start of OSAP through the creation of ARROW, and continues, I think, to advise the folks who are involved with that. There's only one guy that's been there for that whole trip, who has worked with OSAP and then Lou Elizondo with ATIP and created, in essence, the UAP Task Force, who got the government to shift from using the term UFO to UAP.
So I was sitting in my office at the other UFO related job, and I get an email from my old boss. There was a link to the New York Times story, and she said, "Merry Christmas," because I had no idea that was coming at all. And it was literally holy crap, when you're reading that and you have some inside baseball knowledge, but I didn't have any security concerns. It's like, if I had security concerns, I would have addressed it with the security concern. I had the, I can't believe we're saying all this in the New York Times because of everything that was involved, right? But I didn't know it was coming. It took me by surprise.
Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. I'm sure they're on vacation, contacting the desert, so they dropped a weaponized flashback. Basically, weaponized episode number 3. Jay Stratton, the most important government UFO investigator ever. And Jay Stratton, you know, he's a cool guy. There's not a lot of Jay Stratton on the internet. So that's always why you could see at the beginning of this video, George's really excited. Even in this, you know, this is an hour and a half weaponized. It is very little Jay Stratton. And when they do play him, he's not really telling you anything. He tells you about himself, tells you about the programs he was involved in, and what those programs are supposed to be doing, and who he interacted with. I don't think he ever says anything. And he does not come off as very slimy. And the other times that we see him is in like usually casual settings. And even what's kind of interesting about this weaponized is they're talking about how they went and met with Jay Stratton before they did this interview, which is in a hotel. And Jeremy Corbell complains about how it had to be in a hotel. But all of the lead up to getting to this interview, later, you know, 10 episodes later or whatever, sounds like the same trip they made when they went to go meet David Gresh. So, you know, George Knapp was involved with Jay Stratton, he says, for decades at that point, but was never able to mention his name or directly, you know, quote him in any way whatsoever. So it's just interesting, especially if you pay attention to any of the other parts of ufology, right? Like Green Street, who's constantly harping on Skinwalker and Jay Stratton and Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and all of the Skinwalker gang. But you know, even if what he says is true, that they're, you know, that they're all buddies and in on it as far as releasing their, you know, stories and investigations and journalism and videos on YouTube, it's like, it's kind of like, so what? So Green Street spends a lot of time trying to convince you that these guys are like in cahoots with each other. But even if they are in cahoots with each other, it doesn't really matter much. Now, all these guys nowadays, they're all involved in trying to, you know, basically contribute to and operate some type of gatekeeper organization. And that gatekeeper organization, like Soul, is trying to get money from the government to, you know, study aliens, study UFOs, and consult the government on UFOs and aliens. And even then, I'm not sure it matters, because it's not like it's any different than any other industry, except for it's a small one. So, you know, that side of debunking, it's not, it could all be true. It could all be true, but it still wouldn't be a big deal. It wouldn't change much. You know, if all of ufology is just kind of like WWE, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the show at all. So anyways, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell throwing us a flashback. Jay Stratton, they hold him in high regard in their pantheon of government insider saints, whistleblowers who've come out and, you know, told on the government for doing UFOs and aliens. And it's kind of significant because the government has said often and a lot that it's not into UFOs and aliens. And then every so often, every couple decades or so, the government gets caught being really interested in UFOs and aliens. And that in itself is the weird part of it all. Because if there isn't any UFOs and aliens and they're not interested in UFOs and aliens, why are they being so interested in UFOs and aliens and covering it up that they're interested in UFOs and aliens? But it's another one of those things, like even if... So what? So what if they are interested in UFOs and aliens? They could still not be a thing that matters. But also, it could be a thing that matters. They could be, in cahoots with the UFOs and aliens that are flying over the neighborhoods, capturing people and eating them or sexing them or doing whatever with them. So like that part would suck, right? So anyways, Weaponized holds up the government insiders as saints in the Corbell clan. And this kind of starts their charge. This newest kind of charge that, incorporates Lou Elizondo, and then Grush when he shows up, and now Lou Elizondo again, and now Grush again. And you could tell the story, the Weaponized Jeremy Corbell story, is like a super positive story of Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and Bob Lazar and the Corbell clan kind of taking on the government and winning in a lot of ways. Even though George Knapp the whole time was saying, no, don't do it. The kickback's going to be extreme. Plus, we won't get anywhere. And then Jeremy Corbell just taking it. And here's whistleblowers, and here's whistleblowers, and here's UFO hearings, and here's whistleblowers, and here's UFO hearings. Even, basically the arrival of Ross Coulthart and his, him being a celebrity in so many ways. So they could tell the story real easily that, that UFOlogy is winning. And this is one of the places where it started with them unveiling Jay Stratton. But you don't get anything from Jay Stratton. What you get from Jay Stratton is it's all real. But it's good to watch. You have to look through it if you're just interested in Jay Stratton. You got to go find the. Here's 20 minutes of Jay Stratton, but that's his origin story. I think we come back to his origin story for a little bit, and now he's talking about a little bit more modern part of his origin story, the UFO part of it, and then we get little blips in here of the UFO stuff. But it's really, it's not as intense as Elizondo saying everything in parable, because this guy just says, I won't talk about that. So it is interesting that I don't know if this is 3 or 4 years old, that since Jay Stratton came out as Jay Stratton, but there hasn't been I think he has a book coming out soon, so maybe then we'll get it, right? We'll get all the follow-up interviews on Weaponized and etc. Then, forgot about the Stratton book. Stratton book soon. They didn't say it in here because this is just a replay of the episode, but that must be what's going on. We're selling Stratton's book and selling Stratton 2.0. It's kind of exciting.
Okay, is there anything scientific that we can do in terms of, say, the UFO phenomena and these other weird phenomena? And when the new owner of the ranch bought it from Bigelow in 2016, he started phase 1 of his research effort. And the research effort then was to observe quietly and hidden. And for 2 years, they observed the ranch and took video, infrared data, and other data without poking at it. And they saw some things, and they had some things occur, and they reached a point where they couldn't explain anything they were seeing.
Richard Dolan, Intelligent Disclosure. Skinwalker Ranch Secrets. Richard Dolan interviews Travis Taylor. And so that's the other guy that they're all talking about in the Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, Weaponized, Jay Stratton interview. Is that when Jay Stratton went into the private industry and started getting jobs in the private sector, doing a little bit of UFO stuff in secret on the side or whatever, he brought Travis Taylor with him. And I don't know why, but Travis Taylor is really involved with, obviously, Skinwalker Ranch. You see him on Ancient Aliens, but I don't know on Twitter, there's on X, there's several accounts that just troll by publishing stories about how secretive and how, you know, mysterious Travis Taylor and Travis Taylor's life and story is, and then it's just not. You know, so it's really funny. I don't know how that following gets going. It doesn't seem like it's to boost sales in the Skinwalker series. I don't think, you know, but anyways, it's really funny. Since we're doing throwbacks and everyone's on vacation for Contact in the Desert, including Richard Dolan, we went and found Richard Dolan. I didn't want to do really like Skinwalker exactly. You know, I was really looking for Jay Stratton material, and Jay Stratton material's not easy to find because there's just not a lot of it, I think. And then same thing kind of with Tim Taylor. There's not a lot of it as far as these kinds of interviews go. You can find him in stuff though, like Skinwalker, the series, whatever they call it. He's constantly being featured on anything that's Skinwalker or Brandon Fugel related accounts on X. So, you know, you see him talking science about especially Skinwalker Ranch all the time. I've seen on some of those, you know, weird kind of fan boost accounts, whatever they are, them talking about him being on the different boards of different type of gatekeeper organizations, which I didn't go and look into directly, but it would surprise me to find him on all of them, right? He'd be on Soul, he'll be in Sheehan's Citizen Thing, you know, be over at the UAP Defense Fund or whatever it's called. So I bet you he's involved in all of them, like a Gary Nolan. Gary Nolan's like maybe seems like a rung up and deeper in maybe the Soul or the Salt or the Fugel organization. I'm not sure how exactly all that's organized once we get past the, you know, podcasts and the videos and the TV shows. So Travis Taylor, he's not, you know, he doesn't seem to be like at all on the executive level of any of that gatekeeper stuff. But you can find him talking. I never really loved hearing him talk, you know. I don't know if it's just when he would show up on Ancient Aliens, I used to think they were just like including like some kind of like, you know, Southern white boy to try and break it up a little bit, almost as like comic relief because of his accent. But it's, you know, his accent has gotten less over the years. He never really talks about much, you know, like he's one of those, he's not really like a slimy government insider guy. He doesn't really have that feeling, but he still just kind of only talks in like super broad parables always about everything. And then, of course, inside of like every, you know, podcast, he's got 3 sections on how science works. So he's like a scientist who like loves to tell you about how like science works without ever telling you about any of the science that he's like really doing. Mick West talks a lot of shit about this guy whenever he's talking shit about Skinwalker. Green Street, of course, talks shit about him, but Green Street's shit talking about Skinwalker is really kind of like ends up being pretty generic, maybe in just the amount of it. So I don't think he ever really like goes after Travis Taylor particularly too hard or anything specifically or unique. You know, Mick West likes to talk shit about him because the Skinwalker show will have him in the field, quote unquote, you know, saying science stuff and making you know, conclusions, right, that turn out later to be false. And the Skinwalker show, when it's doing its laboratory part of the show and then later doing its like editing and PR part of the show, and then even later after the show is out on X and stuff, they never really debunk themselves. They never say, well, you know, Travis was wrong about this and this is what we figured about later. And there's a few examples where they do that, but there's a whole shitload more where they don't. And that's a fun part of watching Mick West, basically troll or go after Skinwalker and Fugel. And Fugel doesn't like it. He always plays really stupid, but he can't be stupid. But he plays really stupid and then just bans the fuck out of people left and right. So Mick West gets him going. He just doesn't show it too hard until he starts, of course, banning people. So anyways, the reason that you go watch Travis Taylor is because you can't find a lot of Stratton. Travis Taylor is supposed to be the guy that Stratton was dragging around with him to different projects, including Skinwalker. Looks like instead of Skinwalker getting stuck on Travis Taylor got stuck on Skinwalker. There's still a lot of confusion that I don't know if it matters, and people try and clear it up all the time is really just, I think, a way of just, talking about it or whatever. But, who owns Skinwalker and what kinds of scientists and who those scientists are working for and what research they're doing at Skinwalker is like what they talk about non-stop when they talk about all the different owners of Skinwalker and what the different scientists have been doing there. And then if you watch the Skinwalker show, it's not a show with very much substance ever. There's a lot of, drama to it, and commercials and commercial breaks and the lead up to and from the commercial breaks, but there's never really anything ever happening on that show. So I guess it's fun because you get to see some technology, you get to see some science guys kind of talking about technology, but nothing ever really happens. It's just like ghost hunters. It's just like the guys who are doing ghost hunting on Sci-Fi with all their fancy cameras and infrared and night vision and suspense and commercials and all the build up. But there's no ghosts ever. Season after season, and just hundreds of hours of shows and no ghosts. And it's kind of the same thing as Skinwalker. It's a lot of production, it's a lot of suspense, it's a lot of science and science talk and gadgets, and then there's never any werewolves. So anyways, you should watch it. It's a great throwback. If you're not spending some amount of time on Skinwalker, this isn't a bad way to spend a little tiny bit, is to get it from maybe an hour long Richard Dolan episode.
This is the further problem that we have, because we look at the phenomenon like it's one thing, right? And any new information that we get kind of throws it out of whack. So the effect of the phenomenon is definitely psychological for people, except in the rare cases where it's become very physical, as in Jim's case, in the case of abductees or Whitley Strieber, for instance, or where there's a major physical component to it. But it's largely, you see something weird. It's close encounters of the first kind, second kind, etc. So it's affecting your psyche. It has to, because this is not normal, right? What we're trained to think of as normal. So there's that aspect, and we tend to focus on that. And then there's the equipment, there's the machines, there's the stuff that we capture on videotape, right? There's the Tic Tacs, and there's all the other weird stuff we've been photographing, the orbs and all the rest of it. So that implies immediately that there is a physical component to the phenomenon. It's implied right there. What's not so clear is that there are little humanoid beings inside this phenomenon that are like flying around in it. There's this other aspect of it. Now, if they just appeared and disappeared, we could deal with that. That's part of the overall idea of occultism in general. In many countries around the world, they see things, and these things appear and disappear all the time. But nobody says they've got a body. No one says that a jinn showed up and now we've got the body of a jinn. This doesn't happen. So stuff like that is going on, right? So now there's a body. What do we do with that body? Is that a real NHI, or is this was this a test pilot from Russia that crashed in, Roswell, right? Or was it, as Tom sometimes says, maybe it was a Nazi technology?
Engaging the phenomenon. The Conundrum of the Phenomenon. Secret Machines, Volume 3, War with Jim Semivan and Peter Levenda. Jim Semivan is technically like the chief of staff of Tom DeLonge's TTSA cabinet advisor group, board of advisors. He's got a long resume of being in the government and being involved in military stuff and secret stuff and UFO stuff and alien stuff. He's still got his clearances. He doesn't mention things because of reasons. Peter Levenda, he is the author of Tom DeLonge's books, Secret Machines 1, 2, and 3. Engaging the Phenomenon is the name of the channel. Buddy up here, James Lindoli. I think we see him on X as UAP James, but I'm not sure about that. Maybe he says in the notes here. A lot of links, a lot of notes. This is good stuff. Check out our other stuff. I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. But and people call him James. I think he's UAP James, but that could be another guy. I could be wrong. Well, I'll have to look into that later. So, anyways, this is what everyone else is doing. All the people aren't going to contact in the desert. We're having basically X spaces with Tom DeLonge's leftovers at TTSA, and just kind of talking about everything there is in ufology. It's 3 hours. James there, he's got to go pick up his kids at the end of this. Semivan says he's got a hard deadline at some point. This guy Peter keeps on going in and out. They go all over the place and talk about everything ufology, really. This is not really focused on the books at all. James's questions are kind of like, splatter balls. So they just go in there and now we got these two old guys everyone loves in ufology. Everyone loves these two guys. I mean, maybe everyone doesn't love Semivan because he's not usually this like laid back. This is probably Semivan's most interesting and most laid back and coolest, most chillest interview or podcast ever, for sure. He said is most likable in this 3 hours by far, because normally he comes off as kind of like an asshole. There's a little bit of sliminess coming off of him, but most of it's kind of like covered up by the assholeness. Like he's really kind of a dick, but not very much, and there's no one here to be a dick to on this podcast, but he's not even like using a very, very asshole tone, so like this is a good watch. This is a good listen. I mean, there's not much to see, so it's not much of a watch actually, but it's a good listen because whenever they do kind of get it back to Peter Levenda, he is still kind of like telling the philosophical story of the Secret Machines story in all of his answers. So he is especially interesting to listen to. I might have caught it, but there's one moment in there where, actually there's a couple moments where Semivan says, oh, we can't go there, because of reasons. He's still super important. Those super secret shits that he can't let on to to us about. Normally I wouldn't watch anything that said Semivan on it. Honestly, I really don't love hearing his like origin story. He never really tells us anything. There's a part in here where they're talking about Tom DeLonge and how they met him and got to get involved in the TTSA program, and that he was unique Tom DeLonge was unique in that he wasn't trying to get at the secret stuff or get anyone to tell him secret stuff. Like, what he was really after was some way of getting the info from them that was generic enough that nobody would get in trouble and he would be allowed to talk about it to the public. And so, that's, I guess, the most interesting part of their interaction. They're telling their origin story with Tom DeLonge, because they don't get into, trying to make a spaceship and the public funding versus the, shouldn't say public funding, the private funding at first versus the public Pentagon, government funding that came later, that seems to have taken TTSA, off the map. No one's waiting for the next TTSA announcement ever. So this is a couple days old. And like I said, this is what those of us are doing who don't get to go to contact in the desert. Is we're sitting around talking to Peter Levenda about secret machines and Tom DeLonge.
King of Hearts.
A S H T O. What'd you say?
King of Hearts.
What the fuck? What the fuck, bro?
You even spell my name correctly. You could have spelled my name wrong. It could mess up the
Bro,
Keep filming.
how did you do that?
Oh, good.
Cut the deck anywhere you like.
How does he do this?
The Vetted Podcast on X. I checked his YouTube channel and didn't see this clip on his YouTube channel. That is Ashton Forbes, Chris Ramsay. Chris Ramsay doing a magic card trick. 2 of them right back to back. And, it's amazing. These guys are at contact in the desert. Everyone's on vacation at contact in the desert. So, we're not getting a lot of content from all of our favorite content people. And then here they are. And these are definitely some of my favorites. Ashton Forbes, who I say was the biggest villain in ufology, because he has started a redemption arc and is on his way to being the biggest hero in ufology. And look at him. Look how he's being treated there by Chris Ramsay. That's not that's not how they treat a villain. Chris Ramsay, basically my favorite ufology show. I mean, one of my top favorite ufology shows. And then Mr. Vetted there, he's not my favorite, but he's definitely up there in my favorites. So this is some of what I love the most about ufology, is the intersections, and that's what's going on at Contact in the Desert, is all just pure intersections. I don't love the waiting around for it, so I was happy to see this. This was good stuff. This is a good dip into what's going on there with Chris Ramsay horsing around with Ashton Forbes, which I would, if that's what we got from ufology for the next year after this event, I would be totally down with that.